We have come to the end of this particular series on being the church. And it's been a 3-week series, and I can't cover everything about being the church in 3 weeks. So the next series will kind of reflect what we started and what foundation we laid past couple of weeks. Because we talked about, do I need to go to church? Yep, and the answer is no and yes. We talked about last week how we grow together. And that's the most important thing I think this particular congregation needs to realize, because we got a lot of people here, but we don't always feel like we're growing together as a church. And before we can grow out, before we can branch out, we need to grow together and find out who we are as a church. And we talked about the 5 purposes, and I only covered 4 of them last week. This week I'm going to cover 2 of them. One more fully, and because one more fully, and then we're going to tackle another one, and they're kind of happening hand in hand at the same time. And those purposes are mission and discipleship. I know mission and evangelism. I'm sorry, mission and evangelism. Evangelism is a really big, scary word, isn't it? Evangelism. That doesn't fit on a t-shirt. What does that mean? It simply means telling people about Jesus and the gospel of Christ. We can do that. Evangelism demands results. Telling people about Jesus and sharing the gospel produces results. So, today, the title of today's sermon is Be the Church Branching Out, or Spreading Out. Because that is growth, growing out. And we're the time, we label ourselves a creative church, right? We're a bunch of I hear this, we got a lot of creatives here. When you think of creativity, what do you think about? Art, painting, sculpture, photography, putting things together creatively. Arts and creative arts come to mind. Music comes to mind. But I'm here to say this, that creativity is more than just the creative arts ministry that we have going on in the church. Creative arts, yes, the word creative is in there, but there's more to creativity than just art. And I want to talk about how we can creatively engage our community with the gospel of Christ and not just doing arts programming. Notice I said not just doing arts programming. One of our diving board sermons, diving board scriptures today is coming out of 1 Chronicles chapter 4. How many of you have ever seen or heard anything about the prayer of Jabez? Books, sermons, from 5 or 6 years ago, what was it? Maybe this prayer of Jabez came up all over the place. Somebody said, read the prayer of Jabez, pray the prayer of Jabez. You got to do the prayer of Jabez. The Christian subculture in the world just jumped on this thing. There are t-shirts, bracelets, videos, entire books that are about that thick written about this prayer of Jabez. And the prayer of Jabez happens in Chronicles chapter 4, verse 9 and 10. That's it. 2 verses. And the world went crazy over 2 verses. Verse 9 says, Jabez was more honorable than his brothers, and his mother named him Jabez because I bore him with pain. And Jabez called on the God of Israel, saying, Oh, that you would bless me indeed, enlarge my border, that your hand might be with me, that you would keep me from harm, and that it may not pain me. And God granted him what he requested. We don't know anything about Jabez. We don't know who he was. We don't know how much land he had to begin with. We just know that his name means born in pain. And that he asked God to enlarge his territory. And that's the point, that's the part I want to focus on. Enlarging our territory. We have been a small church as long as I can remember. We've seen people come in, we've seen people go. I've seen a congregation smaller than this building. But here's the thing, I've also seen it bigger than this. And I know that we can reach more people and talk to more people and see more people. And we can make an impact in our community. And we are in some cases, but not completely as much as I think we could. And prayer Jabez says, increase my territory, increase my borders, make my impact greater. Make the impact of this church greater than it is now. I hear this, and how do we do that as a creative culture? But you're saying, Pastor Herod, I'm not creative at all. I'll tell you a story. I've been reading this book, Think Like a 5-Year-Old, by Lynn Wilson. Good book. It helps you tap into your creativity. And he talks about NASA. NASA, when they were trying to figure out how to get to the moon, didn't look for the smartest people in the world. They had tests. And if you passed the tests, you could be working for NASA. And it wasn't always about how much you knew, but it also dealt with how creative you were. Anybody seen the movie Apollo 13? Good movie. My favorite part of that movie is when they're sitting there in the office and the capsule was already, engines were going bad, something was going wrong, and they put on, and the guys at the office come to the table with things with these random things, like duct tape and other things. And they said, there's a problem that we have to fix. This is what we have to work with. How do we fix this problem? Let's get creative. NASA was looking for creative people who thought creatively. Lynn Wilson tells a story that NASA had a test. They tested 5-year-olds, a certain test of how creative they actually were. And every single 5-year-old they tested was a creative genius. Every single one of them. And if you've seen some of these 5-year-olds, you can tell that the way their brain works, it's just, they come up with some of the greatest things. They tested the same group of kids when they got into 4th grade. And only 80% of them were creative geniuses. And as they tested them again in high school, that number was down to 40%. So what does that tell us? When you were 5 years old, at one point in your life, you were a creative genius. How does that make you feel? Feel pretty good, right? But we drop off our creativity. We get our creativity hampered. We get our creativity smashed, crushed, set to the side, and we don't think that way anymore. And we wonder why. I started this off by saying we don't have to be creative arts people to be creative. I'll tell you the story of... So I have a list of questions that we need to ask to engage our community. First of all, I need to ask this question. Is engaging our community with the gospel important to us? It should be. Yes, the Bible tells us to go do it. Is it important to us? Is it a priority. It should be. Those are like, Eric, where do we start? First of all, we need to ask ourselves questions. First question, if you're writing these down, I recommend writing these down. I still have a copy of them for you later. If you want to, we'll post that somewhere. It says, first question we need to ask is, how do we view our community? How do we see our community? Do we know our community? I took a class in seminary on urban outreach. I forgot what the exact name of it was called, but reaching your inner city urban communities. And one of the things the lady did, and it weirded me out, she just walked around the room and said, you want to reach your community, this is how you start. She started looking at us. Walked around the entire room and looked, and looked, and looked, and looked, and just eyeballed us. I'm like, what in the name of Buddha is she doing to us? She's just looking. She goes, you want to start to know your community, know how to reach your community? You walk out your door and you take a look at it and see what's going on. That's the same thing they told us to do when we went in the campus ministry. Walk onto the campus and wander around the campus and find out what the campus is like. Find out what your community is like. When was the last time we walked around our neighborhood and met our neighbors and saw them and figured out what they were? Do we view our community as just a bunch of lost people that we have no hope and we don't want to deal with? Do we view them as strangers and people that scare the Jesus out of us and we don't want to even talk to them? Or do we look at them and see a neighborhood full of people who need Jesus Christ and need the gospel in their lives? How do we view our community? Because that's going to teach us how we're going to reach our community. Because if we view them as worthless and pointless, then we'll never talk to them again. If we don't even think that they're here and we just look at them as just people who are taking up space in our parking lot without permission, they're an annoyance and just an obstacle for us to have to cross over. How do we view them? That's an introspective question. How are we looking at this place? Even in your neighborhood, how do you view your neighbors? Are they the noisy people that keep you up all night? Or are they people who need Jesus? The next question is not just how you view it, but a partner question with that is, what does your community actually look like? What does it look like? Who's in it? What's it made up of? Have you looked at it? Do you see these people? Do you know who they are? What does your community actually look like? There's a difference between perception and reality, right? How you perceive it and how it actually is. I perceive these people as crazy, but are they crazy? Are they actually crazy, or am I the crazy one? I see these people as annoying, but is there a purpose for their annoyance? I see these people, but who are these people? What does that require? It requires talking to your neighbors. You got to actually talk to your neighbors. When I was growing up, I lived in a trailer park, and for the first couple of years, we had people who knew each other. We had picnics. We had a softball game on a regular basis, and it was great. But then people moved, and we didn't know each other. And you could tell when somebody moves in a trailer park, because they kind of take their house with them. Or you can tell when somebody moves in because you see the trailer coming down the street. We got new neighbors! Woo! Let's go figure out who these people are. Yeah, I'm from the South. So our neighborhood has changed since the last time we did this. Our neighborhood has changed greatly in this workplace since the last time we looked at it and saw who was here. We have people who moved in, people who moved out. It's an organic, fluid, living creature, a community to live in. The third question is, how does the community view the church? When they hear the Foundry Church, what goes through their mind? When they hear about your church sitting on the street, what goes through their mind? Something goes through their mind. Matthew 5, 13 through 16 says, you are the salt of the earth, but if the salt has become tasteless, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor does anyone light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on the lampstand. It gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. When they talk about your church, are they glorifying your Father in heaven and saying that church does some great things? Or do they say, wow, I know that church. They judge me. They're bad. I don't like them. They don't like us. They don't even know us. Or do they even know that your church is here in the middle of the neighborhood? Do they even know that the Foundry Church exists? Or whatever church you go to, do they know it exists? If they don't know it exists, then we're not being the light of the world, are we? If they know we exist and have bad things to say about us, do they really know us, and do we know them? How does a community view the church? One of the key aspects I got in my urban ministries class was you've got to know and be known by your community. You got to know them. They got to know you. They got to participate. You can't just walk in and they say, oh, who are you? We've got to know our people. We've got to know who we're going to be reaching. And they've got to know who we are. We've got to build a relationship with each other. Because it brings us to the fourth question. What is our community doing that we can participate in? Not, so many times we have an event and we want the community to come to us. We want to set up a tent. We want to set up a cross. We want to say, come here to us and be with us. As the quote is saying, I've heard a lot lately, God didn't call the world to come to the church, but he called the church to go out into the world. God didn't call the world to come to church. He called the church to go to the world. So what is our community doing? What events can we say, hey, that's great. How can we go to that? How can we be part of it? That's what I love what we do about Halloween. We got it right with Halloween. We sit out there in the parking lot and we give out candy to kids that are going to be walking by anyway. We're going to meet everybody in our neighborhood by standing out there and doing something. What else is going on in our community that we can be a part of? And why is that important? So we can be a light to the world. Be the salt of the earth. But they're going to do some things that are uncomfortable to us. They're going to say words. They're going to talk things. Who cares? You can't be the light and not have somebody see it. Where do you need to put the light where it's dark? Where do you need to put salt where it's saltless? You need to be the light of the world. Go into the darkness. But a lot of people always told me you got to surround yourself with Christian brothers and sisters. Yes, that's why you don't go alone. I'm never saying anything. What is the whole point of the sermon series, the next couple sermon series, is that we get together, we be together, so you don't go out in that world by yourself. We go as a church, you go as a community, you go as one other person with you at least, and you be the light of the world. What is our community doing that we can participate in? Then we start asking questions like, what does our community need? What does our community need? Every community needs something. And this Jesus isn't just the answer. But what physical needs? What other things do they need? Swarthmore has different needs than Chester. Chester bread ministry that we have worked well in Chester because people need food and they need things. We tried to give away bread in Swarthmore. They looked at us like we're nuts. How much can we pay for it? It's like, we can't sell it because it was given to us. But they had, and so we think Swarthmore has no needs? We're wrong. Swarthmore has needs. We just don't know what they are. Wallingford has needs. Chester has needs. What does our community need? And how do we find out about it? Or by going to the last question, how can we participate in our community? How do we know our community? How does our community know us? Then we ask questions. Number 6. The 6th question we ask, what can we provide? What needs can we fill? That's an easy one. We started a food pantry, right? If you don't know we have a food pantry, we have a food pantry for people who need stuff. It's on the other side of the building. But the problem with a ministry of where we just provide things, and we see a need, we fill it. Great. We see a need, we fill it. Awesome. That's a good question, a good way to start. But the next question is, number 7 is, how can we help our community solve their own problems? How can we join them in solving their problems? How can we join them in fixing things? Because if you give and give, if you get this culture of just giving everything to everybody, then they're going to start taking. We create a culture of taking and using. I don't like the word the place I work for uses on their for the special needs people. They call them consumers. I don't like that name because that means that all they do is take, and you start seeing them as not so much as people, but as leeches, as consumers, people who are just taking from you. So you don't want to serve them so much anymore because you're like, you keep taking. But how can we get along? I prefer the word client because that means you got to serve these people and you got to serve their needs, right? I prefer the word and to think of the people not here as people we need to reach and fix their lives, but as how can we get involved with them and help them fix their own lives? It says, what can we do? How can we come alongside them to be part of their healing process? Not just do everything for them. So if you do everything for somebody, they can't do anything for themselves. And they become useless people. And we got a lot of useless people in this world. And it's not their fault. I like what's happening in Chester. In Chester, the arts community, and they're building up a community there. When we think of neighborhoods and worlds and places in need, Chester, Pennsylvania comes to people's mind because they do need help. There's a lot of things going on. But they are working on it themselves. They're fixing their own problems. They're gathering together and trying to figure out how can we be better? How can we better this place? And our question should be, how can we come alongside you and help you and be part of what you're doing? That'll change the world. Think of the old proverb, give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. Teach a man to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime. Which comes to question number 8. What do I know that I can teach others? What skills do I have? You all have 1 Peter 4:10. Each one should use whatever gifts he has to serve others. I'm going to give you the NASB as opposed to the HKV version of that because I always get it slightly skewed. But it says this exactly. As each one has received a special gift, employ it in serving one another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. The multi-layered, huge grace of God that comes in many different forms. Each one has its own gifts. I do not have the same gifts that Heidi has. I do not have the same gifts that TJ has. TJ doesn't have the same gifts Jason has. Laura, you've got gifts that none of us have. We got things that we can teach other people, things we've learned, skills we've developed, skills that we put into place that we're like, some things we don't even know why we know it. But we know it. And it's not doing us a lick of good. But teaching that to somebody else who needs to know it. What do I know that I can teach others? I hear of Broadway Church. Lynn Wilson talks about this place called Broadway Church that reached out, saw that their community needed something, found out there's somebody in their church that knows how to do it, and that person in their church started this other ministry that had something to do with legal and law and stuff. And they see what's in their church, and they've made an impact in that world, and they've started other organizations, other ministries, based on what somebody knew, what somebody was willing to teach, what somebody could teach. Knowing their community and knowing what they needed. And the last question that I have on my list, which is the biggest question of all. How can I share Christ as I go? People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? I'm throwing these cliche verses out there that I've heard all my life. But people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I put this question at the bottom of the list, even though it is the entire list, it's the most important question on the list. Because we've got to know these people before we can share the gospel. The street preaching works. I mock street preachers. No offense to people who are called to go stand on the street and yell at people with the gospel of Christ. I don't think it works. So like, where were you last night when I was getting drunk? Because so many people will be asking. People will be asking, where were you when this was going on in my life? Nowhere. You sit here and your Jesus has no effect on me because I only see you standing on this corner yelling at me for the gospel with scripture and berating me with biblical stuff. How's that going to affect my life? That's the question people are asking. I saw people on the street. I tell this story all the time, and I love this story. The fact that I drove by the Home Depot in Springfield. I think it's Springfield down yonder. And I saw these people with signs that were yelling at people saying whoremongers and adulterers will be destroyed. They had scripture references. They were like, yeah! And I'm sitting there and my first thought was, what the heck did the people at the Home Depot do? It's the Home Depot. Am I supposed to boycott the Home Depot now? Because that's like telling a woman not to buy shoes. Telling a man not to go in a Home Depot. Am I right? Can I get an amen from somebody? I don't even have a house. I like to go to the Home Depot to smell the wood. What did these people at the Home Depot do that you're sitting there yelling? And then I had to ask the question, you're yelling at cars as they're driving by. Does anybody care? I'm surprised somebody hasn't tried to hit you yet with their vehicle. This is Philly. And is it effective? No. And that's the stuff that's given the church a bad name. That's the stuff that's given people that hate the church and are upset with the church because of guys like that. And these people, West and something church and that other place that, whatever, you know what I'm talking about. But if we took these questions and answered them perfectly and honestly and got engaged with our community, then missions would not be a problem. We'd know how to do that. We'd come together and say, we found this problem, how do we solve this? Evangelism, not a problem. We can sit there and say, I've invested my life in these people. We've invested our lives together. This is why I'm doing this, because Jesus loves you. We get that figured out. Then we can figure out how to creatively engage our community and share the light of Christ. We will be the light of Christ. We will be a city set on a hill. We will have our borders increased. And we will fulfill the Great Commission in Matthew 28 that says, go into all the world, baptizing and teaching them what I've taught you. Go. And that go isn't, like Brady said, go. It's as you are going, teach the gospel. Make disciples. You can disciple somebody before they get saved. You teach them before they get saved. I think of Judas Iscariot when I think about this. The man who betrayed Jesus. Jesus poured his entire life into that guy. He knew everything. He knew the gospel. He knew the stories. He knew everything else, and he still betrayed Jesus. But more often than not, that tells me that you can pour your life into these people. You can teach them all these things, and then one day they'll get saved, and they'll know more. And they'll find out the truth. Connecting with our community is the way we grow. Branching out. Now, not everybody we talk to will come to our church. But there will be people who say, I want to be part of what you're doing. I said this before, and I'll say it again. We're not going to get old Christians coming through the door anymore. We'll be lucky if they wander in and find out who we are. It's tough to get those people out of these big mega churches and other churches that they are part of, where they're doing a lot of things, because they've got a lot of people who are serving. And so if we're not going to get the old Christians, let's get some new ones. The only way to get new ones is to go and make disciples and share the gospel. Let's pray. Father God, we thank you for all that you've done. Thank you for bringing us here to this place. We pray for our community, Lord. Help us to figure out how to know each other. God, help us to figure out how to be an impact. Help us to figure out how to be a part of it, and not just a church that's in the middle of it. Not just a building that's around it. But Father God, help us to reach this neighborhood. Help us to reach this city. Help us to reach this world. Help us to be the light. A city set on a hill. And help us to shine bright. In your name. Amen.
Amen.